She thought charm could hide a lie, but those blue eyes were sharper than they seemed, and someone in Castley was about to pay for it. This is Agatha Raisin and the Blue-Eyed Alibi. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Your comments make this cozy corner feel even warmer, and if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe so you never miss the next mystery. Spring had crept into Castley with the damp reluctance of a cat pushed toward a bath. The hedgerows showed a tentative green, the daffodils were bravely upright, and the drizzle hung about as if unwilling to relinquish its gossip. Agatha Raisin stood at her cottage window, cigarette in hand, and informed Hodge that this year she would start afresh. Hodge blinked once, which Agatha chose to interpret as approval. A notice from the Women's Institute lay on the kitchen table. Charity wine tasting at the Red Lion proceeds to the church roof appeal. Ordinarily, Agatha avoided anything involving virtue, but she had lately begun to suspect that virtue might come with interesting company. Besides, she had a new tweed jacket and a faint hope that someone would notice. By 7 that evening, the Red Lion's function room smelled of damp wool, baked quiche, and self-congratulation. Rows of folding tables displayed bottles of English wines pretending to be French, and villagers pretended to understand them. Mrs. Bloxby, serene as ever, poured modestly while Agatha made a beeline for the Shiraz. That was when she noticed him. Tall, slim, with hair the colour of wet sand, and eyes the impossible blue of a Cotswold sky that had never actually existed. He was speaking to the vicar's wife with polite animation, holding his glass as though it were part of a performance. "Julian Trent," he said, when introduced, and his handshake lingered just long enough to make Agatha's pulse stumble. "I'm writing an article about rural charm for a travel magazine. Thought I'd start here. Castley, the jewel of the Cotswolds." Agatha gave a snort that came out as a laugh. "Charm's a dangerous word round here. You might trip over it on the way to the bar." He laughed, showing teeth a dentist would envy. "Then you must be the famous Mrs. Raisin, public relations dynamo turned village detective." Agatha's heart performed an undignified leap. "I wouldn't say famous. Infamous, perhaps." She tilted her chin, wishing she'd chosen the scarf that hid her neck better. Throughout the evening, Julian managed to distribute his attention like a skilled politician. He complimented the vicar's sermon, admired Mrs. Bloxby's sense of duty, and asked Doris Simpson whether the Red Lion's carpets were original. Doris, flattered beyond reason, launched into a monologue that included every scandal since 1973. Agatha listened, half amused, half uneasy. There was something too perfect about Julian's ease, too polished a curiosity. Yet when he turned those blue eyes upon her again, the caution melted like butter on toast. "You must find it terribly dull here after London," he said. "Dull?" she retorted. "This place has more intrigue than Fleet Street ever dreamed of, and the food's marginally better." They laughed together, and Agatha felt the old, foolish pleasure of being noticed. The drizzle tapped at the window as if jealous. Later, as she fetched another glass of wine, she overheard Julian asking Doris about her dear friend Mrs. Raisin. Doris, scenting an audience, cheerfully repeated every exaggeration ever whispered about Agatha's celebrity detective days. Agatha flushed, part irritation, part pride. She considered interrupting, then caught her reflection in the mirror, and decided that the lighting was flattering enough to forgive Doris everything. The evening might have ended in harmless vanity if not for the commotion near the trestle tables. Someone had mislaid a wallet. The vicar, mortified, suggested prayer. The landlord preferred a more practical approach and demanded pockets be checked. After 5 minutes of embarrassment, the missing item turned up beneath the trestle near the raffle tickets. Julian's wallet. "Good heavens!" he exclaimed with theatrical surprise. "How careless of me! Must have slipped out earlier." Bill Wong, attending off duty and enjoying the free nibbles, raised an eyebrow. "Lucky find, sir. Perhaps keep it in a safer place next time." Julian laughed easily. "Quite right, Inspector." "Sergeant," Bill corrected mildly, earning another ripple of amusement from the crowd. Agatha forced a smile, defending him out of instinct. "Honestly, Bill, you policemen see crimes everywhere. It's probably the damp air breeding suspicion." Bill gave her a look that translated to take care, but said nothing more. When the raffle was drawn, Agatha winning a bottle of rhubarb wine she had no intention of tasting, the gossip had already begun to fizz. Mrs. Freddie Cummings-Brown whispered that newcomers with good teeth were rarely honest. Someone else remarked that travel writers were usually between jobs. Julian seemed untroubled. He moved through the murmuring crowd, collecting smiles like trophies. When he approached Agatha at the end of the evening, she braced for mockery but received only charm. "Thank you for rescuing me from the Inquisition. May I make amends by buying you lunch in Mercester tomorrow? Purely professional interest, of course. I'd like to hear your view on village life." Agatha hesitated. She could already feel the collective intake of breath from nearby ears, but pride, that most reliable of her instincts, answered for her. "Lunch suits me fine. I shall bring a notebook to record my rural wisdom." "Splendid. 1 o'clock at the Swan Hotel." "Done." He touched her arm lightly. "You've restored my faith in the kindness of strangers, Mrs. Raisin." She watched him leave, noting the ease of his stride and the way conversation seemed to follow him like scent. The drizzle outside had turned to honest rain. Bill Wong joined her by the door, umbrella in hand. "Be careful, Agatha. That man's charm could power the national grid." "Nonsense, he's harmless. Besides, I could do with a bit of sparkle." "Sparkle," said Bill, "can blind you to cracks in the glass." She laughed it off, but his words followed her out into the night. The lane home was slick with puddles. Agatha's heels clicked defiantly, a sound half drowned by the rain. Hodge would be waiting, demanding supper with feline entitlement. She imagined telling him about Julian, how clever, how attentive, how unlike the dreary men of Carsley. Then she remembered Bill's look and told herself firmly that she was far too experienced to fall for blue eyes and smooth talk. At the cottage, Hodge greeted her with the moral superiority of one who had stayed dry. Agatha poured him a saucer of milk, kicked off her shoes and sat by the hearth. The rhubarb wine bottle stared accusingly from her handbag. She opened it, sniffed, grimaced, and poured herself a gin instead. She replayed the evening in her mind, trying to fix the details like evidence. Julian's easy laugh, the misplaced wallet, the faint smirk when Bill questioned him. Perhaps he was just careless. Or perhaps he enjoyed the attention that suspicion brought. "Don't start imagining mysteries," she muttered. "He's only invited you to lunch, not into a crime wave." Hodge yawned. "Exactly," said Agatha. "You understand these things. Still, a little flirtation never killed anyone." Outside, the rain eased into silence. Inside, Agatha's thoughts rustled louder than the fire. Vanity had always been her weakness, but tonight it felt almost like hope. When she finally went to bed, she left the answering machine blinking, one unheard message from an unknown number. She considered playing it, then decided whatever it was could wait until morning. After all, tomorrow promised lunch, compliments, and perhaps the smallest adventure. As she turned out the light, the village clock chimed 11, steady as gossip. The rain had finally washed the Cotswolds clean, leaving the morning pale and shining. Agatha Raisin stood before her mirror in battle mode, navy jacket, cream blouse, and the faintest whiff of Chanel that said, "I am both respectable and dangerous." Hodge crouched on the windowsill, unimpressed. "Don't look at me like that," she told him. "Lunch is research. Purely professional." Hodge flicked his tail as if marking her words for later contradiction. The drive to Mercester was brisk. Agatha hummed to herself, half rehearsing clever lines, half imagining Julian Trent's expression when she entered the Swan Hotel dining room. She arrived early, because arriving late would suggest indifference, and she hadn't the courage for that. Julian was already there, of course, seated by the window, a glass of Sancerre glinting like approval. His smile landed on her like sunlight through stained glass, lovely but faintly artificial. "Mrs. Raisin, you've brightened the whole place." "It needed brightening," said Agatha, taking the seat opposite. The waiter glided over, all solemn efficiency, and Agatha ordered salmon because it sounded expensive. Julian talked smoothly, that polished hum of a man accustomed to being listened to. He told her about his travels in Tuscany, his forthcoming book, Village Charm, England Unmasked, and a confidential business partner who backed his research. When he leaned closer to describe a lost Cotswold manor he hoped to find, Agatha caught the glint of a gold lighter in his hand, engraved with initials E.T. "That's rather smart," she said, feigning carelessness. He pocketed it quickly, a gift from an old friend. The lie sounded soft as velvet, but Agatha's instincts pricked. Years in public relations had taught her that charm is just sincerity rehearsed. Lunch unfolded with professional flirtation. He admired her spark. She laughed too loudly, and both ignored the obvious age gap with heroic determination. When the waiter poured the last of the wine, Julian proposed a toast. "To second chances," he said. "And to good press," said Agatha, clinking glasses. Afterwards, walking to her car, she felt absurdly buoyant. The drizzle had returned, gentle as approval. A handsome man had bought her lunch and called her fascinating. For the moment, that was enough to blot out the small unease curled in her chest like a sleeping cat. Back in Carsley, she found Mrs. Blocksby arranging flowers at the vicarage. Agatha swept in, coat damp and eyes bright. "I've been at the Swan," she announced, "with a travel writer. Very cultured." Mrs. Blocksby smiled with the patience of one who has seen several of Agatha's enthusiasms bloom and wilt. "How lovely. What's his name?" "Julian Trent. He's writing about rural life." "How interesting," said Mrs. Blocksby, which in her voice meant how alarming. "Be careful, dear. The Lord sends lessons in curious disguises." "He's not a disguise," snapped Agatha. "He's, well, charming." "So is temptation," murmured Mrs. Blocksby, tucking a daffodil into place. Agatha left in mild offence and went straight to Charles Fraith, who was sunning himself idly on his estate terrace, nursing a glass of sherry and boredom. "Charles, you'll never guess," she began. "I rarely do," he said. "But do tell me what poor soul you're rescuing from tedium this week." Agatha relayed the story of the lunch, the laughter, the lighter. Charles listened with one eyebrow raised. "Engraved, you say? With E.T.? My dear girl, that's practically a clue." "Don't start," she warned. "It's probably nothing." "Possibly. But remember, thieves have excellent manners these days." "He's a writer." "So was Jack the Ripper in his spare time, I imagine," said Charles lazily. Agatha flounced out, dignity rustling behind her. Yet the image of that gold lighter stayed stubbornly in her mind. Evening settled over Carsley with the familiar comfort of fried onions drifting from cottages. Agatha lit a cigarette, opened a tin of soup, and told herself she was being ridiculous. If Julian Trent were a crook, he'd hardly lunch with her in public. Still, curiosity nagged. The phone rang just as she was contemplating another gin. Bill Wong's steady voice greeted her. "Evening, Agatha. You didn't happen to meet a man called Julian Trent today, did you?" Her stomach dipped. "Why?" "Routine inquiry. We've had a burglary in Mercester. Antique lighter stolen from a Mr. Edward Tallis. Gold, engraved E.T. Ring any bells?" Agatha's laugh came out high and brittle. "Heavens, Bill, you don't think—" "We're just checking leads. He told someone he had lunch at the Swan. Thought I'd confirm." Agatha forced calm. "Yes, well, he was there, with me. Perfectly civilized. No one was murdered over dessert." "Good to know. Still, perhaps keep your eyes open. Tallis was an antique stealer. People get desperate." After he rang off, Agatha sat motionless. The room seemed smaller, the air thicker, a lighter E.T. She replayed Julian's smile, the ease with which he'd pocketed it. Surely coincidence. And yet coincidence had a nasty way of turning criminal in Carsley. Half an hour later, the phone rang again. She snatched it up, hoping for Bill's reassurance. "Agatha, darling, thank heavens." Julian's voice, low, urgent, silk with panic underneath. "I need a tiny favour. If the police ask, just tell them I was with you at lunch on Tuesday. Please, it's terribly important." "You were," she said automatically. "But why?" "I can't explain now. You'll understand soon. I'll make it up to you." The line clicked dead. Agatha stood there, receiver warm in her hand, heart pounding. Tuesday. She glanced at the calendar. Lunch had been today, Thursday. She sank into a chair, lit another cigarette, and stared at the curling smoke. Either the man couldn't keep track of time, or he was rewriting it to his advantage. Hodge padded in, tail high, and leapt onto her lap. "Don't smirk," she muttered. "I may have been duped, but at least by someone handsome." He kneaded her skirt in silent judgment. Agatha poured a small gin, neat, and considered her options. Tell Bill the truth and invite humiliation, or protect Julian and risk complicity. Vanity whispered that she'd been chosen because he trusted her. Experience whispered otherwise. She imagined tomorrow's gossip. Agatha Raisin, seduced and used by conman with blue eyes. The thought stung more than the gin. Rain pattered against the window. Somewhere in the village the church clock struck 9. She dialed Mrs. Blocksby, then stopped before it rang through. The vicar's wife would tell her to be honest. And Agatha wasn't ready for honesty, not when it threatened the fragile thrill of being wanted. Instead, she sat by the fire, watching the flames lick the grate. She told herself she'd decide in the morning. Things always look clearer in daylight, but clarity, she suspected, would come with consequences. "So," she said aloud, "I'm his alibi, the blue-eyed devil." Hodge yawned. "Yes, well, don't look so smug. You'd have fallen for him too, if he'd brought sardines." The cat blinked slowly, unimpressed by romance or crime. Agatha stubbed out her cigarette and poured another measure of gin. "Tomorrow," she promised herself, "I'll sort it out. I always do." The rain quickened against the panes, steady as a heartbeat. Somewhere far away, a man with sky-coloured eyes was rewriting his story, and Agatha Raisin, against her better judgment, was already part of it. Morning came to Carsley wrapped in a thin mist that made even the church spire look bashful. Agatha Raisin sat at her kitchen table with a cigarette in one hand and guilt in the other. The ashtray was already half full, proof of restless conscience. Hodge, coiled on the chair opposite, blinked at her through the smoke like a furry magistrate. "Don't start," she muttered. "I may have fibbed to Bill, but only a little. Half a fib at most." The phone rang, shattering her fragile calm. She stared at it as if it might explode. It was, inevitably, Bill Wong. "Morning, Agatha. Hope I haven't caught you too early." "Oh, I've been up for hours," she lied, grinding out the cigarette. "Just tying up loose ends on the Tallis burglary. Julian Trent's wanted for questioning." Agatha swallowed. "Questioning? You make it sound terribly official." "Well, it is official. He's given conflicting statements about his whereabouts this week." Her voice came out too quick. "He was with me. Thursday. We had lunch. Ask anyone at the Swan." A silence long enough for suspicion. "Thursday. Right," said Bill at last. "That helps. Thanks." He rang off gently, and Agatha sat frozen. Conflicting statements. Had she just confirmed one of them? By mid-morning, she had convinced herself that Julian was innocent. By lunch, she had begun composing her speech for the trial. Vanity and logic were wrestling for dominance, and vanity was winning on points. At 2:00 there came a knock. She opened the door to find a delivery boy holding a bouquet large enough to obscure his head. "For you, Mrs. Raisin," he mumbled. The card read, "Thank you for believing in me." J. Agatha pressed the flowers to her nose and caught the scent of expensive contrition. Hodge sniffed the bouquet, sneezed, and stalked off. She carried the flowers to the Red Lion that evening, just in case someone might ask. Someone always did. The pub was full, warm light, chatter, and that familiar buzz of gossip that made Carsley feel alive. "Lovely blooms, Agatha," said Doris Simpson, polishing a glass. "From your new gentleman friend?" "Hardly a friend," said Agatha with false modesty. "Just a grateful acquaintance." From the corner, a voice stage whispered, "Our Agatha's helping her gentleman thief." Laughter followed, harmless yet barbed. Agatha's cheeks prickled. She considered a scathing retort, but settled for another gin. "Ignore them, darling," said Roy Silver, materializing in a cloud of London cologne. "I heard the whole delicious tale from Bill. You, the village's answer to Matahari. Honestly, I'm thrilled." Agatha glared. "Roy, what on earth are you doing here?" "Business in Evesham. I thought I'd pop by and rescue your reputation before it's completely destroyed. It's frightfully exciting. Love, larceny and local colour. We could pitch it as Agatha Raisin and the Gentleman Burglar." "Get stuffed," said Agatha, but her lips twitched. Roy sipped his gin and tonic with feline delight. "So tell me, did he at least kiss you before nicking the lighter?" "He didn't steal anything," she snapped a bit too loudly. Heads turned. Roy leaned in. "You're protesting too much, darling. That means either he did or you wish he had." "You can go back to London now." "I shall, but not before observing this tragic farce. Look at you, Agatha, half Joan of Arc, half Barbara Cartland." She was spared reply by the pub door opening. Bill Wong stepped in, face grave, and conversations dipped like startled birds. He approached quietly. "Sorry, Agatha, bit of news. Edward Tallis was found dead this afternoon. Heart attack, apparently. But his safe's open and several items are missing." The words struck like cold rain. "Dead? But, oh, Bill, surely Julian wouldn't—" "We don't know. Could be coincidence. Still, your friend's not answering his landlady's calls. Disappeared sometime last night." Agatha's stomach twisted. "He said he was going to clear things up." "Did he?" Bill's tone was mild but searching. Then perhaps he started by vanishing. Roy, ever helpful, murmured, "Very noir." The man with the sky-coloured eyes fades into the mist. How terribly cinematic. Bill shot him a look. "This isn't a screenplay, Mr. Silver." "Pity," said Roy. "It'd sell." Agatha ignored them both. Her mind was replaying every word, every glance. Had Julian looked nervous that day at lunch? Had he hurried her through dessert because he feared pursuit? Or was she imagining things to excuse her own gullibility? She left the pub early, dignity rustling like a paper bag. Outside, drizzle thickened to proper rain. At home, she dropped the flowers in the bin. The action felt brave for 3 seconds, then foolish. She rescued them again, trimmed the stems and set them in a vase. Hodge watched with bland disapproval. "Don't start," she warned him. "I'm not a fool. I just misjudged," he yawned elaborately. The phone rang again, making her jump. She snatched it up. Nothing but static, then the faint click of disconnection. She stared at the receiver, heart thudding. Wrong number, or someone checking she was home. Unable to sit still, she lit another cigarette and paced. Julian's smile haunted her, that easy charm that now looked more like camouflage. Yet guilt mixed with irritation. If he was a criminal, why choose her as accomplice? Did he think her naive, or merely lonely enough to oblige? At 9, Mrs. Bloxby called. "I heard about poor Mr. Tallis," she said gently, "and about your visitor." "Gossip travels faster than the plague," Agatha muttered. "Are you all right?" "Perfectly. Men vanish around me all the time." Mrs. Bloxby chuckled softly. "Be kind to yourself, dear. Sometimes kindness is harder than pride." Agatha nearly said something honest, but stopped herself. Instead, she thanked her and hung up before the sympathy could sting. An hour later, there was a thump at the door. She froze, heart in her throat, and then realized it was the post falling through the letterbox. She picked it up, expecting bills. On top lay a postcard, a glossy photo of Evesham Abbey. Scrawled across the back, "Trust me, darling, I'll make it right. J." The handwriting slanted confidently, as if charm alone could erase crime. Agatha stared at it until the ink seemed to swim. Trust me, the most dangerous words in any language. She placed the card on the mantelpiece beside Hodge's feeding dish, lit one last cigarette, and exhaled a cloud of smoke that curled toward the ceiling like doubt made visible. "Well," she said to the cat. "I wanted excitement. Looks like I've got it." Hodge stretched, unimpressed, and turned his back. Agatha poured herself a gin, the rain ticking softly against the windows. Somewhere beyond Carsley, a man with sky-coloured eyes was on the run, and Agatha Raisin, to her eternal annoyance, still cared. Summer had finally remembered its job. Carsley shimmered under a tentative sun, hedges thick with honeysuckle and conversation. The village looked like a postcard someone had written scandal on the back of. Agatha Raisin stood outside the Red Lion with a cigarette and a reputation in tatters. 2 old ladies from the Women's Institute passed by, nodding with sugar-coated politeness. "Good morning, Mrs. Raisin." "Morning," she said crisply. When they were safely out of earshot, she muttered, "Hypocrites! They're dying to ask if I helped him dig the getaway tunnel." Hodge had followed her halfway down the lane that morning before deciding the gossip was beneath him. Agatha rather wished she could do the same. The Red Lion door swung open. Bill Wong emerged, balancing a file and a cup of takeaway tea. "You're still haunting the crime scene, then," he said mildly. "I'm haunting nothing," she snapped. "Just getting fresh air before the whole village suffocates on its own smugness." Bill smiled. "Rumour spreads faster than foot and mouth, Agatha. It'll pass." "Not soon enough. And don't look so superior. I was only trying to help Julian." "Helping is fine. Falling for a suspect's charm is extracurricular." She bristled. "I don't fall. I investigate emotionally." Bill laughed, the sound of patient friendship. "Then investigate somewhere else before I have to caution you." Outside, the evening smelled of wet earth and secrets. A steady drizzle clung to Carsley like gossip that wouldn't let go. Agatha Raisin sat at her kitchen table, glaring at the phone. It sat there smugly, refusing to ring with apologies from Julian Trent, confessions from the police, or even sympathy from Charles. Hodge, stretched across the table, gave her a look that said, "You're too old for sulking." "You're wrong," she muttered, "as sulking is ageless." The phone finally did ring. She snatched it up. "Aggie, my tragic darling." Roy Silver's voice burst down the line like champagne fizzing over. "Roy, I'm not in the mood. Nonsense, I'm rescuing you. Pack lipstick and cynicism, we're off to Cheltenham. I've found your lover's ex, and she's dying to talk. Delia March? The very one. She's expecting us at 2:30. Wear something intimidating. She likes drama. Agatha sighed, though her curiosity stirred. If Delia March was Julian's ex, she might hold the key to everything, or at least a few delicious secrets. By the time Roy's silver convertible, borrowed of course, skidded into Cheltenham, the rain had turned to mist. Roy chattered as he drove, his sunglasses perched on his forehead like an abandoned idea. "You realize," he said, "this is your cinematic moment, the wronged woman confronting the glamorous rival. I'll stand just behind you, looking sympathetic and fabulous." "You'll look like a waiter," said Agatha. "Then I'll carry a tray. Darling, presentation matters." They found Delia March living in a Georgian flat overlooking Montpellier Gardens, the sort of place that suggested faded luxury and expensive mistakes. The door was opened by Delia herself, tall, still beautiful, wrapped in a silk robe that looked more appropriate for scandal than daylight. "Mrs. Raisin," she said coolly, extending a hand tipped with scarlet nails. "Mr. Silver, come in." The sitting room smelled faintly of lilies and old perfume. On the mantelpiece, photographs displayed Delia in happier days, garden parties, champagne flutes, a younger Julian beside her in one. Agatha sat primly on the edge of a sofa that threatened to swallow her whole. "I'm not here to pry," she began. "Then you're wasting your trip," said Delia, lighting a cigarette. "People only visit me to pry or to borrow money. You don't look rich enough for the latter." Roy stifled a grin. Delia exhaled smoke with theatrical precision. "Julian told me you were clever. I see he hasn't changed his taste for exaggeration." Agatha flushed. "He's in trouble, Miss March. I thought you might help." "Help him, or yourself?" Agatha hesitated. "Both, perhaps." Honesty. How refreshing. Delia smiled without warmth. "Yes, I knew Julian. I also knew what he was. Charming, restless, immoral. He used me to fence antiques from that dreadful Tallis creature." "Edward Tallis?" "Of course. They were partners of convenience. Tallis supplied the goods, Julian supplied the gullible buyers. When it went sour, Tallis threatened to expose him. I dare say that's what got the man killed." Agatha leaned forward. "You think Julian's guilty?" "Guilt and innocence are such dreary words. He's a survivor. The rest is detail," Roy interjected. "And you, dear heart, still pining?" Delia's eyes softened briefly. "Always. You don't stop loving someone like Julian. You merely learn not to admit it. If he's on the run, tell him not to come here. I've no desire to be dragged down again." Agatha studied her. There was no bitterness in Delia's tone, only weary admiration, the dangerous kind. "If you still love him," Agatha said, "why warn me off?" Delia crushed her cigarette. "Because he'll ruin you too. You're older, cleverer perhaps, but the effect is the same. Those blue eyes make you see what you want, not what's there." Agatha rose, gathering her dignity. "I'm not one of his victims." Delia smiled faintly. "Not yet." Outside, Roy waited until they reached the car before exploding. "What a marvellous woman, like Bette Davis with unpaid bills. She's absolutely right about him, of course." "You don't know that," said Agatha sharply. "Aggie, darling, if charm were currency, Julian would be the Bank of England, and twice as crooked. You're lucky he only borrowed your heart." "And possibly my reputation," she muttered. Roy started the engine. "Reputations are like hairstyles. You can always change them, though sometimes it's traumatic." She snorted despite herself. As they drove back, Agatha replayed the conversation in her mind. If Delia was telling the truth, Julian was no romantic adventurer, but a thief wrapped in charm. Yet something in her resisted believing it. Perhaps vanity again, or that dangerous instinct that wanted to be the exception in a man's pattern of deceit. Back in Carsley, the world was smaller and safer, or pretended to be. Agatha stopped by the police station in Mercester, ostensibly to deliver a statement update, but mainly to see Bill Wong. He looked tired, surrounded by paper files and half-drunk tea. "Bill," she said, perching on the corner of his desk, "did you know Tallis was in debt?" He raised an eyebrow. "Where'd you hear that?" "Around. he sighed. Yes, we found evidence of dodgy deals. Tallis was buying stolen antiques, then threatening his suppliers. He had enemies lined up to Morton in Marsh. Half of Mercester wanted him dead. Then Julian could be innocent. Or he could be one of the enemies. You can't clear him by guessing. No, said Agatha, standing, but I can clear myself by finding out. Agatha, save it, Bill. I know the speech about letting professionals handle it. I've tried that before. It's dull. She left before he could argue. That evening, she allowed herself a celebratory gin. After all, she had done rather well. She'd confronted the glamorous ex, unearthed new dirt, and reminded Bill Wong that she wasn't some village ninny fluttering over lost love. She was Agatha Raisin, amateur sleuth and occasional fool, but a determined one. Hodge leapt onto the table, tail swishing like punctuation. Don't look smug, she told him. You didn't spend the day listening to women with perfect skin talk about your ex's blue eyes. He settled into a loaf shape, judgment incarnate. Fine, she said. Be superior. But I'm right. Julian's trouble, and I'm not getting burned again. At that precise moment, thunder muttered over the hills. The rain returned with the authority of habit, drumming against the windows. Agatha sighed, reaching to close the curtains. A knock came at the door. Sharp. Urgent. Her heart jolted. She glanced at Hodge. If that's Mrs. Bloxby with another sermon on forgiveness, I'll scream. She opened the door. Julian Trent stood there, rain-soaked and desperate, his blue eyes startling against the gloom. Agatha, he said hoarsely, you have to help me. For once, Agatha had no witty reply, only the disquieting sense that the mystery had just stepped back into her life, dripping on the doormat. Hodge hissed softly, which seemed a reasonable editorial opinion. The rain had turned steady and personal, the sort that slapped the windows like unpaid bills. Agatha Raisin stood frozen in her doorway, staring at Julian Trent. He looked as though he'd stepped out of a melodrama, rain-soaked coat, hair plastered, those cursed blue eyes pleading innocence. Agatha, he said, breath misting, I had nowhere else to go. You've a talent for inconvenient entrances, she replied, though her heart was thudding. Come in before you ruin the doormat completely. Hodge darted into the hall, tail puffed, emitting the kind of hiss reserved for mice and men of questionable morals. Julian managed a wan smile. Still guarding you, I see. He has better judgment than most, said Agatha, shutting the door. He peeled off his wet coat, revealing a shirt clinging heroically to his chest. Agatha told herself sternly not to notice. You're in trouble, aren't you? She said. Only the kind you can fix, he murmured. That line would have sounded absurd to anyone else, but to Agatha it landed like perfume. She crossed her arms, aiming for skepticism. Tea first, she said briskly. Then you can lie in comfort. Half an hour later, Julian sat wrapped in one of her tartan blankets, steam rising from a mug of tea. Hodge crouched on the armchair opposite, glaring as if running a moral background check. I swear to you, Agatha, Tallis framed me. The lighter was a plant. He wanted leverage to keep me quiet about his dodgy antiques business. And Delia? She asked, voice cool. She tells a different story. His expression softened theatrically. Ah, Delia. She's vindictive. She couldn't bear that I left her. Left her, repeated Agatha, tasting the irony. She was obsessed. When I refused to help her cheat another buyer, she threatened revenge. Next thing I knew, Tallis's lighter turns up in my pocket. It was all a setup. You expect me to believe that? Only because it's true. You of all people know appearances can deceive. That one hit home. Agatha took refuge in sarcasm. Yes, well, I usually prefer mine with better timing. He reached for her hand. You're the only person who's treated me as human, not headline. Please, just let me stay until I figure out what to do. Every sensible cell in her body screamed no. But loneliness, that old saboteur, whispered why not. She sighed. One night, sofa only, and don't touch my gin. Wouldn't dream of it, he said, eyes promising exactly that. The night passed in fits of conscience. Agatha lay awake, listening to rain on the roof and the occasional creak from the sitting room. At one point she crept to the door. Julian slept on the sofa, blanket fallen away, looking maddeningly angelic. Hodge sat nearby like a jailer, tail flicking. Good boy, she whispered. In the morning, Carsley wore its best impression of respectability, birdsong and mud. Agatha shuffled downstairs in her dressing gown to find Doris Simpson in the kitchen, already scrubbing something that hadn't needed scrubbing since 1972. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin. I let myself in. Thought I'd get a start on the floors." Agatha froze. Julian was still in the sitting room. Fine, but keep out of the front room. Spilt ashes everywhere." Doris frowned. "I'll have it done in a tick." "No," Agatha said sharply. "I mean, leave it to me." Too late. Doris bustled past, armed with polish and moral certainty. Agatha followed, praying Julian had the sense to stay quiet. He didn't. As Doris bent to pick up the hearth-brush, a pair of male shoes protruded from under the tablecloth. Hodge chose that exact moment to leap onto the table, knocking the teapot over. Doris shrieked. Julian yelped. Agatha wished the floor would open. "Good heavens!" cried Doris. "There's a man under there." "Decorative purposes," muttered Agatha, grabbing a cloth. Julian scrambled up, attempting charm. "Terribly sorry, Mrs. Simpson. Early morning meditation." "On the floor?" "Very grounding," he said weakly. Agatha forced a laugh that sounded like car brakes. "Doris, this isn't what it looks like." "Then what is it?" "It's complicated," said Agatha, which in Carsley was as good as a confession. Doris sniffed. "I'll be in the kitchen." By the time Doris left, tight-lipped and radiating righteousness, Agatha's nerves were in ribbons. She turned on Julian. "Meditation? Really?" "Improvisation," he said. "It usually works." "Not with Doris Simpson. She'll have told the post office by now." He smiled. "Then at least they'll think you have a love life." "Get dressed before I murder you," she snapped, though the faint flush in her cheeks betrayed her. At 11 came another knock. Agatha groaned. "If that's the vicar, I'm converting to atheism." It was Bill Wong. "Morning, Agatha," he said cheerfully. "Just following up on the case." Her stomach tightened. "Now? Can't it wait?" "Afraid not. Might I come in?" "Of course," she said, summoning false brightness. Julian, half-dressed, darted into the kitchen like a stage extra fleeing a bad scene. Agatha ushered Bill into the sitting room, heart hammering. "Cup of tea?" she offered. "Lovely." She called, "Doris," then remembered. "Oh, she's gone. I'll fetch it." In the kitchen, Julian stood rigid beside the kettle. "Hide," she hissed. "Where?" "Anywhere quiet and uncharming." He ducked beneath the table again, and she returned with the tray. Bill, of course, had police instincts. His eyes flicked around the room, noting every disturbance, the still damp cup, the second plate. "Expecting company?" he asked mildly. "Just Doris. She's been dusting." "With men's shoes, apparently," he said, nodding toward the pair under the tablecloth. Agatha froze. Hodge, evidently bored, chose that moment to nudge the cloth aside. The shoes gleamed accusingly. Bill coughed. "Very thorough cleaning indeed." She opened her mouth, but Bill held up a hand. "Relax, Agatha. I'm off duty. But do yourself a favor. Don't harbor anyone, especially not someone with charm and a record." He stood, setting his cup down. "You're harboring charm over sense. Again." "He's innocent," she insisted. "They all are, until proven otherwise. Keep your doors locked, and your car keys safer." When the door shut behind him, Agatha sank into a chair. Julian emerged sheepishly. "That could have gone worse. He could have arrested you. He didn't. Only because he's fond of me." Julian smiled. "As am I." "Spare me the flattery. Pack your things, you're leaving tonight." He bowed slightly. "If you insist." "I do." Evening descended with suspicious peace. Agatha tried to read, but every creak made her glance toward the sitting room. At 10, she poured a final gin and found the sofa empty, blanket folded neatly. No note, no Julian. "Good riddance," she told Hodge, though her voice lacked conviction. Then she noticed the key hook. Empty. Her stomach dropped. Oh no, she hurried outside. Her small hatchback, usually sulking by the hedge, was gone. "He wouldn't," she whispered. He had. The next morning, Bill's call confirmed it. "Agatha, your car's been found, abandoned outside Tallis's shop. We've pulled new fingerprints from the door handle. Any idea whose?" She stared at the receiver. "No," she said slowly, "but I have a dreadful feeling they'll belong to the man with sky-coloured eyes." After she hung up, she stood at the window, watching the drizzle return. Hodge leapt onto the sill, pressing his nose to the glass. "You tried to warn me," she said softly. "Next time I'll listen." Hodge blinked once. non-committal as ever. Agatha lit a cigarette, exhaled, and gave a wry smile. Still, I do pick them well. Even my criminals have style. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing Carsley clean again, or pretending to. The sun rose over Carsley in its usual apologetic fashion, a dim glow that promised warmth and delivered gossip instead. Agatha Raisin sat at her kitchen table, scowling at the latest edition of the Mercester Courier. The headline, "Local Detective Duped by Blue-Eyed Crook," leered up at her. "Well," she muttered, flicking ash into her saucer, "at least they got the eyes right." Hodge yawned from his perch on the windowsill, unimpressed by both press and human folly. "You could show a little sympathy," she told him. "You're the only male in my life who hasn't stolen something." He blinked, which was probably agreement. The phone rang. She answered warily. "Agatha," came Doris Simpson's voice, bright with gossip. "We missed you at the WI. You've become quite the topic." "I can imagine," said Agatha, voice dry. "Oh, you'd have laughed. Someone called you our own Mata Hari." "I'm sure I would have," she said, and hung up before the laughter in Doris's voice could finish. That afternoon, she ventured into Carsley's High Street, chin high, expression fixed in that brittle half-smile she used for battle. The village had perfected the art of pretending not to stare. The postmistress offered her change with a sympathetic grimace. At the bakery, someone whispered "car thief" behind a tray of scones. By the time she reached the vicarage, her mood was dangerous. Mrs. Bloxby opened the door with her usual calm, as though braced for confession. "Come in, dear. You look ready to bite someone." "If you've a volunteer list, I'll sign up," said Agatha. Inside, the sitting room smelled of lavender polish and comfort. Agatha threw herself into the armchair, lighting a cigarette. "They're treating me like some sort of villain," she said, "as if I organised the theft myself." Mrs. Bloxby poured tea. People enjoy a scandal, especially when it's harmless. It distracts them from their own secrets. "Well, they can find another scapegoat. I've been humiliated enough," Mrs. Bloxby smiled gently. "Perhaps, my dear, it's time to consider forgiveness." "Forgiveness?" Agatha's voice went sharp. "I haven't even considered revenge yet." "And humility." Agatha gave a short laugh. "That's next on my list, right after sainthood." The vicar's wife regarded her kindly. "You can't control gossip, Agatha, but you can change its ending." Agatha stubbed out her cigarette. "Oh, I intend to. I'm going to find Julian Trent and make him wish he'd drowned in that rainstorm." That evening she drove to Charles Frayth's manor, where the man himself was stretched out on the sofa, reading Horse and Hound as if deadlines were for other species. "Ah," he said, without looking up, "our scandalous heroine returns. Have you signed any film rights yet?" "Shut up," she snapped. "I need your help." "Excellent. I was beginning to fear boredom." Agatha explained her plan. Lure Julian back to the Cotswolds by tempting his greed. "We place a notice in the Courier under one of his aliases. Something about an unclaimed manuscript tied to an antiques appraisal. He won't resist." Charles studied her with amused admiration. "You want to bait the trap with deceit. How very you." "You're helping, not judging," she said. "Fine, but when this ends in chaos, I reserve the right to say I told you so." "That's half the fun." The advert appeared 2 days later. Unclaimed property from the late E. Tallis. Contact JT via Mercester Vicarage, urgent matter of inheritance. It worked almost too well. The calls began within hours, not from Julian, but from various hopeful vultures. Mrs. Bloxby fielded them all with saintly patience. "You're certain this will flush him out?" she asked when Agatha visited that evening. "Positive. Julian won't ignore money. He's probably hiding in some cheap boarding house, waiting for the right opportunity to slither back." Mrs. Bloxby sighed. "Let's hope your trap doesn't catch someone else." "That's why you're here, to bless it." "Or mop up after it," said Mrs. Bloxby, not entirely joking. Agatha was halfway through her third gin when Charles arrived with the newspaper clipping folded like contraband. "The bait's set," he said. "Now we wait." "Waiting is dull," said Agatha. "I prefer results." "You prefer drama," he corrected. "But don't worry, drama loves you." Drama, as usual, obliged. It happened the following night. Agatha had just finished a late call with Roy Silver, who was proposing a headline for her redemption, Agatha Raisin, the woman who loved too wisely, when the phone rang again, urgent and crackling. Mrs. Bloxby's voice trembled. "Agatha, "There's been a break-in at the vicarage." Agatha dropped her cigarette. "Are you all right?" Yes. I startled the intruder. He ran off before the police arrived. Nothing taken but a few papers. They think he came looking for something specific." Agatha's guilt hit like a slap. "Oh no, that advert." "I rather suspected as much," said Mrs. Bloxby, voice gentle despite everything. "I'll be right there." The vicarage looked bruised under the streetlights, one window shattered, curtains billowing like ghosts. Mrs. Bloxby stood in the doorway, wrapped in a cardigan and composure. "He was in the study," she said. "Tall, quick, wearing gloves. I heard a drawer slam and went down with the torch. He pushed past me and fled. The vicar's out visiting parishioners, thank heavens." Agatha's eyes darted around the room. Books displaced, papers scattered, the air heavy with the smell of adrenaline. "It's my fault," she said. "He came for the bait." "You couldn't have known." "Of course I could. I invented the blasted trap." Mrs. Bloxby touched her arm. "Don't punish yourself before the facts arrive." Bill Wong appeared from the hallway, notebook in hand. "Evening, ladies. Agatha, I had a feeling I'd find you here." "Bill, before you start, don't worry, I'm not here to scold, but next time you publish an advert that uses a vicarage as a front, perhaps let the police in on it first." Agatha flushed. "Fine. What have you found?" He pointed to a torn scrap of paper bag on the floor. On it, scrawled in pencil, were letters and numbers. M4 27B. "Storage code," said Bill. "We think it's for one of those lock-up units in Mercester. And look." He turned it over. Faint lipstick print. Initials DM. Agatha stared. "Delia March. Seems our mystery's not done yet." "And Mrs. Bloxby nearly paid for my stupidity," said Agatha quietly. "Nonsense," said the vicar's wife. "I'm quite sturdy. You, on the other hand, look as if you could use another gin." Later that night, back at her cottage, Agatha sat by the fire, glass in hand. The flames reflected in the window like mock applause. Charles had insisted on driving her home, and now lounged on the sofa, eyes half closed. "You know," he said, "for someone who claims to hate drama, you're remarkably good at producing it." "Shut up and drink," said Agatha. "Seriously, though, you can't shoulder all the blame. If a criminal decides to misread your genius, that's on him." "Tell that to Mrs. Bloxby. She could have been hurt. She's tougher than you think, and fonder of you than she lets on." Agatha sighed. "I should have told Bill. I was so busy proving I could fix things myself." "Classic Raisin," said Charles fondly. "Too proud to wait for the cavalry." She gave him a sideways glance. "And you? Why do you keep getting involved in my messes?" "Because they make life bearable," he said simply, "and occasionally profitable." She smiled despite herself. When he'd gone, Agatha sat in silence. Hodge padded over, leaping onto her lap with the soft weight of forgiveness. All right, she murmured, stroking him. "I was an idiot, but at least a useful one." Hodge purred, unconvinced. Outside, rain began again, light but insistent. Carsley slept peacefully, but Agatha's thoughts were wide awake, circling around one phrase. "Storage code." "M4 27B, she whispered. "Delia March, what have you been hiding?" The fire popped, and Hodge flicked his tail. Agatha reached for the ashtray, eyes narrowing with renewed purpose. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow we find out." Morning in Carsley arrived with an exaggerated innocence, all birdsong and dew, the sort of morning that made Agatha Raisin deeply suspicious. She sat at her kitchen table with a cigarette and the torn scrap of paper from the vicarage. M4 27B. The faint lipstick print stared up like mockery. Hodge watched from the windowsill, tail twitching. "Don't start," she told him. "It's not meddling if you're right." The phone rang. Bill Wong's calm voice came through. "We traced that code. Storage unit outside Mercester. Could be connected to Tallis's antiques dealings." "And you're letting me come along?" "I'm not letting you. I'm merely failing to stop you." "Splendid," said Agatha. "I'll bring Charles. He's decorative in emergencies." The Mercester storage park sat between a petrol station and a field of bored cows. Each unit was painted municipal green, all equally untrustworthy. Bill signed the paperwork with weary efficiency while Charles examined the padlocks with an air of aristocratic detachment. "You know," he said, "breaking and entering before breakfast feels terribly energetic. Are we sure gin isn't required first?" "We're not breaking in," said Agatha. "We have Bill's blessing." "Discreet blessing," murmured Bill, "meaning I'm not writing this down." Agatha grinned. "My favourite kind." The lock clicked. The metal door rolled up with a sound like thunder. Dust motes swirled in the weak light. Inside were stacks of boxes, furniture shrouded in sheets, and the distinct smell of old money gone wrong. Bill switched on his torch. "Let's start with labels." They opened boxes, brass candlesticks, porcelain dogs, a silver clock engraved E. Tallis. "Stolen goods," Bill muttered. "Most of this matches our missing list." Agatha's heart thudded. Then Julian was involved. "Or someone wants us to think so," said Charles. "Never underestimate the appeal of framing an attractive rogue." She ignored him, drawn to a battered filing cabinet in the corner. One drawer resisted, then gave way with a squeal. Inside, a neat folder read J.T. Las D.M. Bill raised an eyebrow. "Julian Trent and Delia March." Agatha opened it. Letters, invoices, and photographs spilled out. In one, Julian and Delia toasted glasses over a crate of antiques. In another, Tallis's name appeared on a ledger beside sums of money and a note. "She suspects. Must silence her before she talks." Agatha read it twice. "She? Fiona Gale?" "Likely," said Bill. "She worked with Tallis before he died. If she'd discovered their dealings, they'd have to shut her up," finished Agatha grimly. Charles leaned against a crate. "How very inconvenient of her to notice." "We need to warn her," said Agatha, snapping the folder shut, "before someone decides to finish the job." Bill nodded. "Fine, but I drive, and no heroics." Agatha gave a sniff. "I'm never heroic, merely efficient." "Tell that to the last man you hid under your table," said Bill dryly. Fiona Gale's flower shop in Mercester looked as it always had, cheerful from the pavement, slightly chaotic inside. The bell above the door jangled as Agatha entered, followed by Bill. "Fiona?" No answer. The air smelled wrong, faintly chemical. Bill's nose wrinkled. "Gas." Agatha darted behind the counter. Fiona lay crumpled beside a tipped-over stool, a smear of dirt across her cheek. Bill switched off the main valve and knelt. "She's breathing," he said. "Call an ambulance." Agatha fumbled for the phone, heart pounding. The ambulance arrived quickly, lights flashing against the shop front. As paramedics carried Fiona out, her eyelids fluttered. "Blue eyes," she murmured weakly. "Blue eyes." Agatha froze. Bill caught her arm. "That's not proof. Could be hallucination." "Could be memory," said Agatha. "Or coincidence," said Charles, who had arrived late, carrying coffee like a spectator at a cricket match. She turned on him. "Oh, do shut up, Charles. Someone tried to kill her." "At least you were right," he said mildly. "You do enjoy that, even in tragedy." "Not this time," she said quietly. The story spread through Carsley faster than steam from a kettle. "Florist's near-fatal gas leak," read the evening paper. By morning it had evolved into something nastier. "Village femme fatale's lover strikes again." Underneath, Agatha's photograph, unflattering, mid-blink, sat beside Julian Trent's charming mugshot. She nearly choked on her toast. "They've made me sound like a cross between Cleopatra and Bonnie Parker," she spluttered. Hodge glanced at her plate with professional interest. "Not for you," she said. "You can't live on scandal either." The phone rang again. Roy Silver's voice trilled down the line. "Aggie, darling, you're front-page gold. Do you realize how many people are asking for interviews?" "I'm not a circus act," she snapped. "You could be. The detective who loved too much. Think about it." "I'd rather think about murder," said Agatha, slamming the receiver down. She poured a gin despite the hour and called Bill. "Any word on Fiona?" "Stable, but still unconscious. The hospital's keeping her under observation." "And Julian?" "Vanished. We've got border alerts out, but if he's still nearby, he'll try to retrieve whatever's left in that storage unit. Someone's already cleaned out half the evidence. Luckily, your folder survived." "So, Delia and Julian were in it together," said Agatha, "and Tallis double-crossed them." "Possibly, or the reverse. Either way, your instincts were right." "Of course they were," she said, though the victory tasted flat. That afternoon, she sought refuge at the Red Lion. The pub smelled of damp wood and gossip. Every conversation paused as she entered. "Don't mind me," she said to the room in general. "Just here to poison the gin." Doris Simpson handed her a glass with cautious sympathy. "We know you didn't mean for that poor woman to get hurt, Mrs. Raisin." "Comforting," said Agatha. "But it's amazing how easily I become the villain of my own stories." Charles joined her uninvited. "You should enjoy the fame. It's the only immortality we middle-aged get." "Speak for yourself," she said. "I intend to live forever out of sheer spite." "In that case, another round," he said, waving at Doris. They drank in companionable silence. Agatha could feel the villagers' eyes flicking toward her, curious and self-righteous in equal measure. "They'll tire of it soon," said Charles. "Not soon enough. I've half a mind to move to Evesham." "Too many people there as well," he said. "Besides, you'd only scandalize a larger audience." She gave a reluctant laugh. "You know me too well." "That's why I worry," he said quietly. Later, back at the cottage, she spread the contents of the JT-DM folder across her table. Bills, letters, and photographs. The paper trail of betrayal. She traced a finger over the note about silencing her. "You tried, didn't you?" she murmured. "You went after Fiona, not Tallis." Hodge padded over, placing a paw on the photograph of Julian. "Yes, him," she said. "Don't look so smug." The phone rang again. "Bill." "We've confirmed it," he said. "The handwriting on that note matches Delia March's, not Julian's." Agatha blinked. "Delia wrote it. She planned the attack." "Looks that way, but we can't rule out that Julian carried it out. They were partners, remember?" She hung up slowly, staring at the fire. The flames licked higher, and for once she felt no warmth. So Delia had framed Julian, or Julian had let her. Either way, Fiona's whispered blue eyes haunted her. "You're in it up to your whiskers now," she told Hodge. "And so am I." He stretched, yawned, and turned away, the feline embodiment of apathy. Agatha smiled faintly. "Fine, be indifferent. Someone around here has to be." Outside, the rain began again, fine and persistent, as if the weather itself were bent on confession. Agatha poured another gin, lit a cigarette, and muttered, "Tomorrow, Delia March. Your secrets won't stay in storage forever." Hodge flicked his tail, unimpressed. The clock ticked on, steady as suspense. Morning broke over Castley with the self-satisfied calm only small villages can muster after scandal. Agatha Raisin, however, felt far from calm. She sat at her kitchen table in dressing gown and slippers, staring at her latest humiliation, the Daily Courier's headline, "Femme fatale foils herself." Beneath it, her own unflattering photograph, cigarette in hand, looking like she'd just been arrested for smuggling gin through customs. Hodge regarded her from the counter, tail wrapped neatly around his paws. "Don't judge me," she said. "You've never been betrayed by a man with cheekbones." The phone rang. It was Roy Silver, far too chipper for anyone human. "Aggie, darling, you're on the front page again. Do you realize your scandal's gone national? They called you the meddlesome spinster who solved it by vanity. Iconic." "Roy," said Agatha through gritted teeth, "come over before I hang myself with the phone cord." "On my way. And bring your powder compact, love. The camera loves a comeback." She slammed the receiver down and lit another cigarette. "Meddlesome spinster," she muttered. "I'll give them meddlesome." An hour later, Roy arrived in a cloud of enthusiasm and expensive aftershave, clutching a camcorder. "Right," he announced. "If they're going to make you a caricature, we'll beat them at their own game. We'll film your triumphant hunt for the scoundrel himself." "Roy, this isn't entertainment." "Everything's entertainment, darling. Now chin up. Hero angle." "If you film my chin, I'll bury you in the garden," she said, but he only grinned. Charles Frayth arrived soon after, leaning against the doorframe with infuriating ease. "Ah, the cavalry," he said, "or rather, the cavalry's publicity department." "Mock all you like," Agatha snapped. "Julian's somewhere in Mercester, and I'm finding him before the police do." "Because humiliation isn't enough, you're after martyrdom now." "Because I owe Mrs. Bloxby and Fiona Gale some peace of mind," she said, "and because I'm tired of being everyone's fool." Charles tilted his head. "Fair enough. Let's go ruin someone else's day." Mercester's Saturday antique market was the kind of place where time itself came to gossip. Rows of stalls displayed china dogs, tarnished spoons, and memories priced for tourists. Agatha stalked through them like a bloodhound in kitten heels. Roy trailed her, camera whirring. "Look fierce, darling. Very Lady Sleuth meets country life. If you point that thing at me again, I'll test it on your skull, she hissed. Charles sauntered ahead, peering at a stall of clocks. Julian was fond of timepieces, if I recall, always counting other people's minutes. A flash of movement caught Agatha's eye, a tall man at the far end of the market, fair hair glinting. "That's him?" she cried, charging forward. Unfortunately, it wasn't. The startled man turned out to be a local councillor's husband, who fled clutching a brass lamp. "Oh dear," murmured Charles, "you've assaulted a taxpayer." "He looked guilty," said Agatha, breathless. "So do most people near you," said Roy, still filming. Before Agatha could retort, a uniformed constable appeared, rubbing his arm. "Madam, did you just strike an undercover officer with your handbag?" "If I did, you were undercover very well," she snapped. "He's not pressing charges," said the constable, sighing. "Just try not to hit anyone else." "Fine," she said, glaring at Roy, "and you can stop filming my arrest." "Never," he cried. "This is gold." Bill Wong found them an hour later in the market cafe, surrounded by teacups and the ruins of Agatha's dignity. "You three are a public menace," he said, sliding into the booth. "Good morning to you too," said Agatha. "Find anything useful?" "Yes, Julian's been sighted near the old railway yard. A witness saw him meeting a woman matching Delia March's description. My team's on its way there now." Agatha stood. "Then so are we." "Absolutely not," said Bill. "Bill," she said sweetly, "I'm the only one he's likely to approach without running." He sighed. "Fine, but you do as I say. One false move and you're back in Carsley writing memoirs." "That's blackmail," said Agatha. "That's friendship," said Bill. The disused railway yard lay on the edge of Mercester, a graveyard of rusted carriages, graffiti, and puddles that reflected a miserable grey sky. Agatha shivered. "Picturesque, isn't it? Perfect spot for murder or a picnic." "You pick terrible picnic partners," said Charles. They crept between the derelict sheds. Voices echoed faintly, a man and a woman arguing. "That's Delia," whispered Agatha. They peered through a broken window. Inside, Julian stood with Delia March. Her glamour looked frayed, lipstick smudged, eyes feverish. "You ruined everything," she was shouting. "I told you to hide the folder." "You killed him, Delia," Julian's voice cracked. "Tallis was shouting. You panicked. I cleaned up your mess." "And now you'll ruin mine," she said. Agatha froze. So Delia had killed Tallis, and Julian had taken the blame. Delia reached into her bag, hand shaking. "I can't let you talk." Julian grabbed her wrist. "Don't be dramatic." Too late. The struggle was clumsy, tragic, almost absurd. She stumbled. He shoved her aside. Her heel caught on the floorboard and she tumbled down the short metal stairs, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. "Oh, Lord," whispered Agatha. Before Julian could flee, she stepped through the doorway. "Don't even think about it." He spun around, wild-eyed. "Agatha, save it. You've had enough stage time for one life." Bill appeared behind her, gun drawn, voice steady. "Julian Trent, you're under arrest." Julian looked from Agatha to Bill, defiance draining away. He raised his hand slowly. "I never meant for any of it." "That makes two of us," said Agatha. Bill cuffed him while an ambulance siren wailed in the distance. Charles appeared beside her, unruffled. "You do pick dramatic venues. Ever thought of theatre?" "Only if they pay in gin," she said faintly. Delia survived the fall. Fractured ribs, concussion, and a lifetime of regret. At the hospital, she refused to meet Agatha's eyes. "You wanted truth," Delia whispered. "There it is. I killed Tallis by accident. Julian helped me hide it. I thought he loved me for it. Turns out he loved himself." Agatha's voice was cool. "You nearly killed Fiona Gale, and nearly Mrs. Bloxby. Was that accidental too?" Delia turned away. "Go back to your village, Mrs. Raisin. You're too honest for this world." Agatha left before she could reply. The next morning, the Courier ran another headline. "Village Spinster Solves Case by Sheer Vanity." Underneath was a photograph of Agatha mid-blink again, cigarette smoke curling like shame. She read it at the Red Lion over a large gin. Charles lounged opposite, reading the same paper upside down. "At least they used your good side this time," he said. "It's the same side," she muttered. "You should be proud, Aggie. You helped catch a murderer." "Yes, and I'm still the village idiot who fell for him." "A universal experience," said Charles. We all fall for something dangerous eventually. You fell for racing, she said. That hardly counts. Oh, it's ruined me in subtler ways, he said cheerfully. Bill arrived, tired but smiling. Press won't stop until you give them a quote. Care to oblige? Agatha thought a moment, then said, Tell them vanity solves more crimes than virtue. They'll love that, said Bill. So will I, said Agatha, lighting another cigarette. That evening, back at her cottage, she poured herself a final gin. The rain had returned, steady, forgiving. Hodge sat on the armchair, eyes half closed, purring as though he'd solved everything himself. You see, she said softly, I told you I'd fix it. He blinked, unimpressed. She laughed under her breath. All right, maybe not fix it, but at least it's over. The clock chimed 9. Somewhere down the lane someone was laughing, a sound that belonged to life going on. Agatha stubbed out her cigarette and stretched. Vanity, meddling and gin, she murmured. My 3 food groups. Hodge yawned, curling into the cushion. And don't you dare tell anyone, she added. Outside, Carsley settled back into drizzle and calm. For now, that was victory enough. Carsley had the decency to look innocent again. The drizzle returned on cue, washing away scandal and cigarette ash in equal measure. Gardens glittered, gossip softened, and the village resumed its favourite occupation, pretending nothing had ever happened. At the Red Lion, the fire crackled with smug warmth. Half the village had turned out for a casual drink, which meant the usual committee on reputation management. Agatha Raisin, freshly coiffed and guarded by lipstick, sat with Bill Wong and Charles Fraith near the bar. Well, said Doris Simpson from 2 tables away, loud enough for Evesham to hear, it's not every day our Agatha catches a murderer and makes the papers. Agatha raised her glass. It's not every day the papers call me a spinster either, Doris, but one must suffer for one's art. A ripple of laughter followed, good-natured with just enough malice to feel authentic. Bill Wong leaned back, smiling. You know, Aggie, in my report I nearly wrote obstructed justice into solving itself. Then I thought better of it. How kind, said Agatha. Next time put it on a medal. Charles, sprawled like a cat in tweed, added, You really do have a fatal weakness for pretty eyes. It's practically a diagnostic condition. Yours are bloodshot, said Agatha. Consider me cured. Roy Silver, who had insisted on joining by popular demand, was already narrating to anyone who'd listen. When the smoke cleared, she stood there, our Aggie, hair wild, mascara heroic, justice personified. Roy, said Agatha, if you tell that story one more time, I'll sue you for emotional damage. It'll sell beautifully, he said, undeterred. I'm thinking from PR to peril, the Agatha Raisin story. Make sure it's out of print by Christmas, she replied. The laughter spread again. For a moment, even Agatha allowed herself to feel almost admired. Later, outside, the drizzle had deepened to proper Cotswold rain. Charles held an umbrella with courtly negligence. Going my way? He asked. You never go my way, said Agatha. True, he admitted. That's what keeps it interesting. She shook her head. One day you'll die of laziness. And you'll die of curiosity, he said cheerfully. Mine will at least make better reading. He grinned and kissed her cheek lightly. Good night, you incorrigible woman. Good night, you ornamental nuisance. The umbrella vanished into mist, leaving her alone with the rain and a faint sense of peace. Back at the cottage, Hodge greeted her with the faint disdain reserved for humans who arrive late and damp. He stretched, yawned, and inspected her shoes for evidence of betrayal. Don't worry, she said, hanging up her coat. I've retired from romance. Temporarily. He blinked, unconvinced. Agatha poured herself a gin, the sound as familiar as forgiveness. The fire crackled. Outside, Carsley's lights shimmered through rain like polite secrets. She sat down, cigarette in one hand, glass in the other, the day's compliments still echoing faintly in her ears. They think I'm vain, she told Hodge. I am. But if vanity solves murders, who am I to apologize? He responded with the slow blink of a creature who expected nothing sensible from her species. Exactly, she said. Next time I'll fall for brown eyes. Sensible, trustworthy brown. Hodge yawned elaborately. Fine, she said. No eyes at all, then. The clock ticked on. Rain tapped the windows. The village settled into its nightly quiet, a comforting kind of boredom Agatha would never admit she liked. Then, from the corner, the fax machine emitted a small, obstinate beep. She frowned. No one faxed her anymore except estate agents and the Women's Institute. The page rolled out slowly, curling on the floor. She picked it up. A glossy travel brochure stared back. Blue Horizon Adventures. Explore the world with Julian Trent. In red letters across the top, the postal stamp read, Return to sender. Agatha stared at it, then laughed, a soft, rueful sound that startled Hodge into twitching his tail. "Well," she said, "some men do have a talent for haunting, don't they?" She folded the paper neatly, dropped it into the bin, and poured herself another gin. "To Carsley," she said aloud, "land of drizzle, gossip, and second chances." Hodge stretched luxuriously by the hearth, the undisputed monarch of sanity. Agatha leaned back, smoke curling upward, her reflection faint in the window, a woman older, wiser perhaps, but still gloriously meddlesome. "Next time," she murmured, half smiling, "I'll remember to ask about references." Outside, the rain went on falling, steady and forgiving, as if the village itself were laughing softly with her.